Prosecutors are asking a Mahoning County judge to sentence the man convicted of firing the shots that killed 4-year-old Rowan Sweeney.
Knowing that they have only seen her to an inch of her life and then be told that she left them there.
The driver accused of shooting a state trooper fired the bullets through his passenger's window during a traffic stop. This detail and other new information were revealed in court documents after the two suspects appeared before a judge in Putnam County. According to the arrest affidavit, the two suspects, Timothy L. Davis Jr. and Braze Rucker, had previously been in the same prison. During that time, Davis had made threats against law enforcement. Around 7:45 p.m., Davis was pulled over by Trooper Adam Coffrin. As Coffrin walked to the passenger side window, where Rucker was sitting, Davis pulled out a handgun and shot Coffrin in the shoulder near his neck. The vehicle fled the scene and was later found in Gallatin, where it had been attempted to be burned. The car was stolen. Law enforcement tracked down Davis and Rucker using cell phone data, surveillance video, and Cash App transactions. The courtroom filled about 4 rows of pews with Tennessee Highway Patrol troopers.
This was an incident where an officer was It's one of their co-workers, one of their colleagues, and I believe the troopers here and other officers were here just to show support for the victim in this case.
Timothy L. Davis Jr. faces charges of attempted first-degree murder with a bond set at $3 million. Braze Rucker is charged with facilitating a felony with a $1 million bond. Both suspects pleaded not guilty. Their next hearing is scheduled for September 4th. Heather Scott, the former mistress and later wife of David Temple, took the stand in his sentencing trial. David Temple was convicted of murdering his first wife, Belinda, in their Katy home in 1999. Despite being married to David Temple for 18 years, Scott testified that she never discussed Belinda Temple's murder with him. On the stand, she struggled with recalling key dates and appeared nervous. Andy Kahn, a spokesman for the Temple family, was present in the courtroom during her testimony.
Whether she saw him or not, the bottom line was she did remember receiving a bouquet of roses, and that was on Valentine's Day, and that was basically 33 days after Belinda was murdered.
Heather Scott and David Temple were having an affair at the time of Belinda Temple's murder. They later married, but eventually divorced.
Guilty of murder.
Guilty of murder as charged.
David Temple was convicted twice for the murder of his pregnant wife, Belinda Temple, in 1999. The case has returned to court more than 20 years later because the last jury could not agree on his sentencing.
You got to go back to when the crime was committed in 1999. Temple's eligible from anywhere to probation on up for life.
The defense's strategy focused on portraying David Temple as a changed man. Rebecca Temple, who was friends with Belinda and was initially upset about the affair, testified to the jury about Temple's efforts to rebuild his relationship with his adult son. She described him as an amazing father and highlighted his personal growth since the events of the past.
It's going to be a very difficult chore. For 12 people, it's hard to get 12 people to agree on what you want for lunch. So to have 12 people to actually agree on a sentence is going to be interesting to see what they come up with.
The trial's outcome may hinge on whether David Temple's son takes the stand to support him, as he has previously done. With both sides still presenting witnesses, the jury could receive the case, making it a critical time for all involved. Prosecutors are pushing for a maximum sentence of 93 years for Brandon Crump, convicted of the tragic shooting that killed Rowan Sweeney. The sentencing is set for Monday, and the case has already seen co-defendants Kimoni Bryant and Andre McCoy receive their sentences of 20 years to life. Rowan Sweeney's family is expected to find some closure with this final sentencing.
Prosecutors are asking a Mahoning County judge to sentence the man convicted of firing the shots that killed 4-year-old Rowan Sweeney to at least 93 years in prison. Brandon Crump is set to be sentenced on Monday. He was convicted in February on 16 counts, including murder. The shooting happened back in September of 2020 inside of a home on Perry Street in Struthers. Prosecutors said Crump deserves maximum sentences because of the circumstances of the crime and the way he acted afterward. Co-defendants Kimoni Bryant and Andre McCoy were sentenced earlier this month to 20 years to life in prison.
Dre Francis, 26, appeared in court and will remain in jail without bond until a proof-evident hearing is held. The state is pursuing the death penalty for Francis and his co-defendant, 44-year-old Ronnie Palmer, due to the murder of Deputy Fernando Escada. Prosecutors revealed that Palmer and Francis were neighbors and connected through their girlfriends. Deputy Escada was ambushed and killed while searching for Palmer, who had allegedly assaulted a pizza shop worker. Investigators found 41 shell casings at the crime scene, and evidence links Francis directly to the shooting.
We do know that there were 2 weapons used, and we do know that after a search of the residence where Mr. Francis was living or staying at the time of the murder, we did find ammunition that matched one of the murder weapons.
In addition to the capital murder charge, Dre Francis faces an additional charge of tampering with evidence. Court records indicate that a witness reported seeing Francis attempting to dispose of the firearms used in the shooting of Deputy Escada. This charge relates to efforts to conceal or destroy evidence directly connected to the crime. Sean Brown, 21, appeared in a Queens courtroom to face sentencing for the 2019 murder of Amir Griffin, whom he mistakenly believed was a member of a rival gang. Before the sentencing, the court heard emotional impact statements from Amir Griffin's family. His mother, overcome with grief, directly addressed Brown, expressing her profound sorrow and anger over the loss of her son.
I'm angry. Took my soul from me. I haven't slept in 5 years. Our lives have been forever altered, and we entrust the court to deliver justice and protect others from experiencing the same heartache.
Before sentencing, Sean Brown sought to retract his previous plea deal, hoping for a more lenient verdict. Despite this attempt, the court proceeded with the sentencing, considering the emotional impact statements from Amir Griffin's family and the gravity of the crime.
I told you I was going to take the plea deal because of the fact I told my attorney I did not want for trial, and she told me she was doing my trial for free.
This is the second time that you have attempted to say, well, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, and I'm not going to allow it. I've made the decision, your request to take this plea back is denied.
Judge Kenneth Holder addressed the rise in gang violence during Sean Brown's sentencing, emphasizing the severity of the situation. He told Brown that he would have a significant amount of time to reflect on his actions, highlighting the long-lasting impact of gang violence on communities and the justice system's commitment to addressing it.
You just ruined your life, and your life could have been a lot better than it is now. You could have done so much more with it, but it's going to hit you that, you know what, I really did mess up.
Queens District Attorney Melinda Katz expressed satisfaction with the 30-year sentence handed down to Sean Brown. The sentence includes 25 years for the murder of Amir Griffin and an additional 5 years for the gun charge. The DA's office views the sentence as a necessary measure to address the grave nature of the crime and the ongoing issue of gang violence.
30 years is a good amount of a sentencing for this. It gives the family closure.
The shooting of Amir Griffin, an innocent teenager, is reported to have been part of a larger blood feud among 3 rival gangs in Queens. This feud and its violent repercussions highlight the ongoing and troubling impact of gang violence on communities. James Baldwin, a former South Carolina police officer from York, has been denied bond after his 2018 arrest for murder. Baldwin is accused of killing his wife by beating her to death and then staging a car crash to conceal the crime. Baldwin denies the charges.
If he chose to do so, there's absolutely no record of that. He had every opportunity to flee the country if he had chosen to do so, and he obviously did not. He was subsequently put on bond in York County.
To save his wife, save his wife. When they found her, she was actually laying on her back in a creek down into a off the road and close to a bridge in a rural road here in Chester County. And the pathologist stated was she had a 24 centimeter fracture, 9.5 inches, going from where that laceration was over her eye all the way to the back of her skull. According to the pathologist, she would have died or been symptomatic and dead within minutes. Non-accidental injury to Miss Judy Orr, and that she did die at the hands of this defendant.
Deonte Banks, convicted of murdering former high school basketball star Greg Shedd, was sentenced to 63 years in prison. Shedd was gunned down outside a West Houston bowling alley in August 2022. After a painful journey for Shedd's family, they expressed relief and a sense of justice as Banks was sentenced. The jury reached their decision after less than 2 hours of deliberation.
We, the jury, found the defendant, Deonte D. Banks, guilty of murder.
This morning, the jury handed down a 63-year prison sentence for Deonte Banks, which is exactly what the prosecutors had requested.
We're thankful that we've been able to bring justice to him, that his life was not in vain.
This will give the grieving family a chance to begin healing. Medica Bush is the victim's mother.
We're glad that we got to this point so we can move forward now. It's hard to really grieve when you have this weighing on you if the person is going to be held accountable. So now that he is, we can move forward and start healing.
Her son, Greg Shedd, was only 24 when he was killed outside a Memorial area bowling alley in August 2022. Prosecutors say he was trying to protect his aunt, who was being attacked by one of the women Deonte Banks had come with. Banks then pulled out a gun and shot Shedd twice, leading to his death.
This was a senseless and cold-blooded.
After the sentencing, Banks apologized to the family. However, they later said they didn't find his apology sincere and felt he hadn't shown any real remorse during the 1.5 years they've been waiting for justice.
Sorry. Somebody that didn't even know him took his life because he had the rest of his life ahead of him.
Shedd was a father to two lovely little girls, a former high school basketball star, and the cousin of basketball star Jamal Shedd. He was a young man who was deeply loved by many.
He was a wonderful person.
Greg was like an angel on earth. Like, when he came around, literally, all your problems went away.
His family said that Greg's memory and legacy will live on through them and the many lives he touched. Tennessee Secretary of State Trey Hargett took a plea deal for his DUI case. Hargett pleaded guilty in Coffee County Court and addressed the media afterward, holding his wife's hand and apologizing sincerely. After attending the Bonnaroo Music Festival, he was charged with driving under the influence. He's already paid the $350 fine and will have his driver's license restricted for a year. During this period, he'll be allowed to drive his personal car for state business, but must use an interlock system, also known as a car breathalyzer. He will also attend DUI school. Here's what he had to say to reporters right after his guilty plea.
It's been a challenging time, and it's been humbling. There have been a lot of dark moments, honestly. I couldn't have got through without my wife and my family. And I'd tell you additionally, I've been overwhelmed by the grace and kindness and forgiveness that so many people have reached out to me with during this time. And I want them to know that I will never forget that.
It's clear that he won't be making this mistake again. Andrew Jackson has been sentenced to life in prison. District Attorney Kim Ogg stated that while there's no joy in this outcome, it was a crucial decision for Josue Flores and his family. The sentencing was at the judge's discretion, with Jackson facing a range of 5 years to life. The prosecution pushed for the maximum sentence, which the judge imposed after brief closing arguments. Jackson remained stoic as the sentence was delivered, briefly gesturing to his family before being led out of the courtroom. The afternoon was filled with hours of testimony. The prosecution called Flores's family, including his father, sister, and best friend, while the defense presented Jackson's family, including his mother, stepfather, half-brother, and eventually Jackson himself. Jackson denied any involvement in the murder or any mental illness, suggesting that DNA evidence might have been tampered with or cross-contaminated. However, a forensic psychologist testified that Jackson is, in his words, very psychologically disturbed with paranoia. Just minutes after the sentencing, Josue Flores's father spoke briefly in Spanish.
Recuérdenlo siempre con amor.
His words translated to, "My son, please remember him with love." He also mentioned in Spanish that he was satisfied and happy with the sentence, believing that justice was served. For now, Andrew Jackson has been sentenced to life in prison. It's been nearly 4 years since Joe Clyde Daniels disappeared without a trace. Dixon County officials have spent countless hours questioning the family and searching for the child, but baby Joe's remains have never been found. His father, Joseph Daniels, appeared before a judge and was sentenced to 51 years in prison to be served concurrently for the charges related to his son's death. In court, new and disturbing details emerged. Joseph Daniels, who was convicted of killing his son, faced Judge David Wolf as the state presented excerpts from his mental health reports. These reports revealed disturbing plans, including intentions to blow up his home and bite off the noses of school peers, among other violent thoughts.
Were you familiar with the assessment in which the client had several homicidal ideations directed towards his parents, including a plan to make a bomb and set it off when they were sleeping?
No.
Did you discuss with him his plan to break the noses of his parents and to kill them?
No.
Did you discuss with him his plan and documented mental health history of having a plan to kill his school peers via strangulation and biting off their noses?
No.
Joseph Daniels' family was present in court, along with one of the jurors from Chattanooga who wanted to see the case through. A jury found the 31-year-old guilty of felony murder, which carries a life sentence with the possibility of parole. At the hearing, additional details about lesser charges were addressed. Baby Joe's mother, Crystal, was also in court as the proceedings continued. A woman has just been sentenced after shooting a homeless man in Nashville. The case involving Katie Quackenbush dates back to 2017. She was found guilty of reckless endangerment. Quackenbush was sentenced to 11 months and 29 days of unsupervised probation. She chose not to request judicial diversion. Both the state and Quackenbush provided testimony in court. The state emphasized that Quackenbush used a weapon against someone who had only used words. In her own statement, Quackenbush apologized to the man she shot and to everyone involved. She highlighted her progress since the incident, including becoming a mother, pursuing education, and becoming a lawyer to help others.
1 foot in purgatory and 1 foot in the real life. My life has stood still since that day. This has been the worst experience of my life, but I'm grateful that it happened because it has changed me so dramatically to the core in every ounce. Through all of the pain, that I'm so grateful that everything happened, because sometimes hard lessons are the best lessons, and it truly, truly has shaped my life forever.
Quackenbush currently lives in Texas, where she will serve her probation. A killer is heading to prison for the rest of his life. What began as a missing persons case nearly 3 years ago has ended in tragedy.
Heartbreaking that the memories that I have of her were stripped away because all I can remember is the terrible pain we had to tolerate.
Cheryl Lynn Beardall's son, Achilles, faced his mother's killer in court. Philip O'Reilly did not offer any apology.
O'Reilly, do you want to say anything?
No, Your Honor. This was moments before he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Beardall's family giving O'Reilly a send-off as he heads to prison.
Beardall's family gave O'Reilly a send-off as he headed to prison, with her uncle admitting to feelings of revenge. Her mother spoke about the deep pain of losing a child.
Gives this grieving mother light at the very end of this dark tunnel is that he will not get out of prison.
In 2020, O'Reilly claimed that Beardall picked him up and left him with the kids. This led to Beardall, a mother of 3, being reported missing. O'Reilly was later arrested and charged with murder, child abuse, and crimes against children. It was revealed that Beardall had suffered long-term abuse at the hands of O'Reilly, who had beaten her with a dog leash in front of the children.
Knowing that they have only seen her beaten to an inch of her life, and then be told that she left them there with their abuser.
Beardall's sister, with whom the children now live, was targeted by O'Reilly. From jail, O'Reilly attempted to hire a hitman to kill her, her husband, and 2 of the children who are not biologically his. Once he realized he was caught, O'Reilly agreed to a plea deal that removed the death penalty from consideration.
He wasn't surprised as he has put us through a roller coaster since he entered our life.
Jessica Canoodle also shared a victim impact statement from Beardall's youngest child.
Philip, my mommy Sherilyn.
The girl, who is also O'Reilly's biological child, provided the victim impact statement shared by Jessica Canoodle.
I want
him to always stay in jail forever. So he can't hurt me anymore.
As part of O'Reilly's plea deal, he was required to reveal the whereabouts of Beer Doll's body. Her family reported in court that he had dispersed the remains in various locations. Her mother has expressed doubt about the truthfulness of his statements. A man who confessed to being under the influence of drugs when he struck and killed a grandmother with his SUV was sentenced, with the victim's family addressing the court. The courtroom was filled with emotion as 23-year-old Ian Diebolt received a 6-year sentence for vehicular manslaughter, resulting in the death of Tenla. The victim's granddaughter spoke directly to Diebolt during the proceedings.
Imagine going through what we're going through right now.
Diebolt, who was high on fentanyl and en route to purchase heroin, became distracted and crashed his SUV into the victim, severely injuring her legs. The victim bled to death while waiting for help at the scene on Grant Street in Buffalo. Diebolt pleaded guilty to the charges and, in court, requested the opportunity to address the victim's family directly.
Very sorry from the bottom of my heart. You know, every day I think and I wish I can change what happened, and I know I can't.
Although Diebolt was sentenced to 2 to 6 years in prison, his lawyer anticipates that he will likely serve around 4 years due to good behavior. Diebold's mother made the following statement.
All of our family and friends are very sorry for the victim's family. It's a very tragic accident.
Regarding the victim's family, they have expressed that they are trying to move forward. Rap legend Bun B and his wife Queenie gave emotional testimony in court regarding a home invasion from 2019 that made major headlines. During the incident, the rapper shot an armed robber, and now that man is facing sentencing for his crime. Court will resume tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. It has been a highly charged and emotional day in the 209th Court. Bernard Freeman, known as Bun B, and his wife Chevalier recounted the harrowing attack at their Houston home. DeMonte Jackson, 25, has pleaded guilty to aggravated robbery and burglary with intent to commit another crime. Jackson's parents testified on his behalf, citing his IQ of 81 and mental health issues. The Freemans recounted how Jackson forced his way into their home, threatened Mrs. Freeman with a gun, and attempted to steal their car. Bun B, who was upstairs, retrieved a gun and shot Jackson as he tried to flee in a vehicle parked in the family's garage.
Shooting back at me, and I proceeded to unload my weapon. Well, I wasn't sure if I unloaded my weapon, and then he fell out of the car, he threw his gun down, I started fighting with him, my wife came through the garage door, she started screaming. Tell
Dad, you ain't gotta ask.
No! Hang on, man.
Following that outburst, there was a short recess before court resumed. Jackson's father testified that his son had been a standout high school football player with many advantages, including 2 cars and a moped. However, he noted that he had not been a disciplined father, instead opting to be a friend. After being injured in the shooting, Jackson fled to a hospital, where he was later arrested. 2 more defense witnesses are set to testify tomorrow morning, after which the judge will deliver a sentence. Investigators are seeking public assistance in identifying a woman who was murdered by one of the most notorious serial killers in the country. The Hamilton County Cold Case Unit has released a sketch and 3D mold of the suspected victim from Chattanooga. This case is unusual because, while police know what happened, the victim's identity remains unknown. Samuel Little, the serial killer, has confessed to killing her after spending just an hour with her in the early 1980s at a bar along 9th Street in downtown Chattanooga. As life moves on, especially along Highway 299 in Dade County, drivers are unaware that their daily route is tied to an unresolved murder case.
Cases may be cold, but they're not forgotten. We're just waiting on the right piece of information to come in to help us solve it.
Nearly 40 years later, Joe Montgomery is determined to give her family the answers they have long deserved.
Anybody out there missing a sister, a niece, aunt, daughter, whatever, we're just asking for the public, not just in Chattanooga, but Georgia, Alabama, the whole area.
In December, Hamilton County detectives and GBI agents traveled to Texas to interview Samuel Little, who is currently serving a life sentence there. Little has confessed to murdering 90 people.
Sometimes he decided to kill rather quickly, and then other times it was drawn out over a longer period of time.
Investigators reviewed hours of Samuel Little's testimony in preparation for the interview. They were astonished by the detailed recollections he had about his victims. Little recounted that the woman had asked him for a ride from a nightclub in downtown Chattanooga. He claimed that he then strangled her and abandoned her body in the woods in Dade County. Her skull was used to create this new facial rendering.
He was not boasting about what he had done, but he was very, very emphatic that he wants these people found, those that haven't been recovered and identified. He thinks they should be.
Investigators believe the victim was a young black woman in her early 20s when Samuel Little killed her. They are asking the public to recall any details from the past in hopes of solving this cold case. The Cabletown County Cold Case Unit has successfully resolved 17 cases in the past 4 years, and with your assistance, they hope to increase that number. This incident centered on Ramon Bueno. In October 2014, in Maricopa County, Ramon took the life of an Arizona Department of Public Safety officer. The prosecutor detailed how the event unfolded, revealing a dramatic and unexpected twist in the story.
This is a case about a documented Mexican mafia gang member who had such little regard for life and law enforcement that he shot a DPS trooper in the face within less than a foot, simply for the reason he did not want him to know who he was. He also did this in front of a documented fellow gang member of the Mexican mafia. And in that world, in his world, that is the ultimate act of violence and prestige. He wasn't done then. As two responding troopers were over the body of the man who was slowly breathing after being shot by the defendant, the car that he was in came back around as they were rendering aid. He wasn't done. He shot again at the trooper that lay on the ground with the gun to the face and the two responding officers. We are all here because of Ramon Luna Bueno. And in spite of him, Trooper James Casey, Ronaldo Cruz, Mike Alfano, they survived and they are here. And they will tell you exactly what happened that night. On October 8th of 2014 at approximately 3:06 a.m., Officer James Casey was on routine patrol for the Arizona Department of Public Safety. He was in the area of Indian School in the I-17. Now at that point in his public service career, he'd already served 4 years in the Air Force, 8 years as a city cop back in Massachusetts, and nearly 10 years at the Arizona Department of Public Safety. He was riding alone in his marked vehicle, fully uniformed. At that time, he came off of the I-17 and was going to turn back around on Indian School Road when a vehicle caught his attention. It was a 2008 blue Mercury Sable, and he could tell immediately that there was a window tint violation. The tint was way too dark. Now, instead of immediately turning his lights on, he waited to see if they went onto the I-17, and they did. He went straight ahead, not to spook them, and to gather more information. The car got onto the I-17 southbound from Indian School Road, and Officer Casey then got behind the vehicle as it headed southbound. He ran the license plate. It was a Kansas license plate. He called it into dispatch, and he also called for backup, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, on that same night, the defendant was in the car. He lived in a different world. He was a well-known member of the Arizona Mexican Mafia, and he went by the street name of Mono, M-O-N-O. And he wasn't alone. He was with another member of the Arizona Mexican Mafia, Danny Vargas. Now, Danny Vargas, he also had a street name or a moniker, and he went by Lil Sinner, L-I-L. That's who he ran with. And that night, before the car stopped, you'll hear that the defendant also had his girlfriend with him, Valerie Jaime. She had a street name, Traviesa, or Trouble. Now, to back up, before we get to the car stop, let's talk about what happened that night. The defendant didn't have a job, he didn't have a car. He was running with Danny. He was running with his girlfriend, Valeria. And Danny called over to a woman and asked her for a ride in the area of 23rd Avenue in Indian School. She couldn't go because she had some family issue with a daughter having a baby, but she knew a girl by the name of Lori Richardson who was around. Lori Richardson knew another associate of the defendants, Vanessa Martinez. And Lori and Vanessa agreed to give Danny, Valeria, and the defendant a ride. Lori was driving her blue Sable. She picked up the defendant and the other two, along with Vanessa, in the area of 23rd Avenue and Indian School. Now, where everyone was seated in the car is going to be critical in this case. Lori was driving. Vanessa was in the front passenger seat. In the rear driver's side, the defendant sat. In the middle seat in the back seat was Valeria. Behind the passenger front seat was Danny Vargas, little sinner. Now, going back to where I left off. Officer James Casey has turned on his lights. They're going southbound on the I-17. Lori pulls the car over, and she pulls right into the parking lot at the Knights Inn, which is at McDowell Road and the I-17 on the frontage road there, right next to adult entertainment, Jaguars. So they're in the front of the Knights Inn. The plate was run, the information was logged in. Officer Casey will tell you his spidey sense kicked in. You will hear from his colleague, Officer Cruz. Casey never called for backup. He did that night. He walked up, he looked in, the front passenger window was up, the back passenger window was up, canted his head a little bit and looked down at his notepad, and it was at that point that Ronaldo Cruz, Officer Cruz will tell you, he saw the muzzle flash near Officer Casey's face, and Officer Casey immediately went down. You'll hear that the defendant started ordering the driver to drive. Officer Cruz and Officer Alfano started toward the back rear of the car. Now, what Lori, the driver, and the defendant didn't know at that time was in that Knights Inn parking lot when they immediately took a right, there was no way out. It was a walled-in perimeter around the hotel. So as Officer Cruz is over the body of James Casey, screaming his name, "Can you hear me? Can you hear me?" 32 seconds goes by. You'll hear this over the radio. Mike Alfano is there also. He hears the screeching of tires, Ronaldo Cruz. And he looks up, and as the blue Sable is going by them again, from the rear passenger side, they're being shot at again, and they return fire. You'll hear Ronaldo Cruz tell you he had to quickly leave James Casey, retreat back, and go back, and then they body dragged James Casey behind an area for cover. They did not know if the shooter was going to come back a third time. Lori Richardson drove a few miles away into a secluded industrial area with railroad tracks. The defendant and Danny Vargas get out. Now remember, this is late at night, a little past 3 a.m. Danny had been shot in the back. Valeria Jaime had been shot in the arm. Danny and the defendant got out. You'll see video footage from a train that had been there at the railroad tracks from the Union Pacific Railroad in the area of 27th Avenue and Jackson Street. You can't see their faces. But there are two men who are getting out of the vehicle and running from the car. Investigators found a bloody shirt in that area based upon follow-up interviews with individuals. DNA came back to Danny Vargas, as the witnesses said. Also near that railroad scene where the defendant got out, you will hear that the police found 4 .357 Magnum unspent casings, shell casings, or unfired bullets in common terms. Now the 3 women left in the car: Valeria Jaime, Lori Richardson, Vanessa Martinez. They dumped the 2008 Mercury Sable in an abandoned house. They then spent the night at a metal scrapyard trying to figure out what to do. Valeria went back and got some items out of the back of the trunk, one of the men that lived there. No one that night that was in the car contacted the police. Now the next day, Lori Richardson, the one who did not have a relationship with gangs or personal relationship, she went and turned herself into the police. She really was the only person in the car that night that the defendant could not control. Valeria Jaime was the girlfriend, Danny was a fellow gang member. You will hear from a gang expert in this trial that Mexican Mafia members do not snitch in their terms against other Mexican Mafia members. Those are their terms. Now, Lori Richardson gave an interview to the investigators in this case. She gave multiple interviews. She was not forthright right away. She will tell you she was scared. She will tell you she was scared of the defendant, what she had just seen him do. She was scared of others involved. She was scared of the Arizona Mexican Mafia and their gang ties. Did not want to identify anyone involved. You will hear that Lori agreed to testify during trial. She was prosecuted for lying in those initial interviews. And that she has a testimonial agreement and she needs to come in and tell you what happened and answer your questions, not just the questions from the attorneys. Lori will tell you that Ramon Bueno was the only one in the car with a gun that night. We'll tell you that the defendant said, "I'm not going in." You will also hear that there was great follow-up by the detectives in this case. Every person in that car on the night were Officer Cruz, Alfano, and Casey were shot. They were eventually caught and interviewed, all of them. You will hear from William Sunderland, a man who was at the motel, staying at the Night's Inn. He will tell you that the shot from the car first came from the rear passenger side, and that there were no other shots in the car from any other area of the car. And you will hear that this is consistent with the physical evidence in this case.
After carefully examining every detail of the case and considering all the testimonies presented during the court proceedings, the jury reached a fair and just verdict.
The record will show the presence of the defendant, counsel, and the jury. Has the jury reached a verdict?
We have.
All right, please hand all forms to the bailiff. Thank you. The clerk will read and record the verdicts.
In the Superior Court of the State of Arizona, in and for the County of Maricopa, State of Arizona versus Ramon Bueno, CR 2014-149-887-001. Count 1, attempt to commit first-degree murder. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do unanimously find the defendant as to count 1, attempt to commit first-degree murder, impasse, signed, foreperson. Count 2, aggravated assault. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do unanimously find the defendant as to count 2, aggravated assault, to wit, James Casey, guilty, signed, foreperson. Count 3, aggravated assault. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do unanimously find the defendant as to count 3, aggravated assault, to wit, Ronaldo Cruz, guilty, signed, foreperson. Count 4, aggravated assault. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do unanimously find the defendant as to count 4, aggravated assault, to wit, Mike Alfano, guilty, signed, foreperson. Count 5, drive-by. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do unanimously find the defendant as to count 5, drive-by, guilty, signed, foreperson. Count 6, threatening or intimidating. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do unanimously find the defendant as to count 6, threatening or intimidating to wit, James Casey, guilty. Signed, foreperson. Count 7, threatening or intimidating. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do unanimously find the defendant as to count 7, threatening or intimidating, to wit, Ronaldo Cruz, guilty. Signed, foreperson. Count 8, threatening or intimidating. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do unanimously find the defendant as to count 8, threatening or intimidating, to wit, Mike Alfano, guilty. Signed, foreperson. Are these your true verdicts, so say you one and all?
Yes.
Members of the jury, you will each be asked a question by the clerk. Please answer it yes or no.
Juror number 1, are these your true verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 2, are these your true verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 3, are these your true verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 4, are these your true verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 6, are these your true verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 7, are these your true verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 8, are these your true verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 9, are these your true verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 10, are these your true verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 11, are these your true verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 12, are these your true verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 14, are these your true verdicts?
Yes.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are going to bring you back after the lunch break. There are additional matters that we need to attend to, and I cannot release you yet. The admonition remains in effect. You are not to discuss this case with any third parties or among yourselves unless and until I tell you to. You will go on your lunch break. I am going to release you back to the jury room. I am going to allow you to confer with, well, actually, just one moment. Counsel, please approach.
Judges often face the most challenging responsibilities in court. They not only hand down sentences, but also ensure justice for the victims and their families.
Judge, I would ask 1 year.
Thank you. All right, amending the previous record, the court, I did not place on the record the fact that I had reviewed the pre-sentence report that was prepared and filed in this case. I have reviewed that pre-sentence report. I would also note that for purposes of the sentencing, I did review and consider the pre-sentence reports referenced by Ms. Dahl. However, my sentence is based on the information contained in the pre-sentence report in this case and the information that I heard in trial at this case. That has been the focus of my attention in the sentencing in this matter. Before I begin, I would like to say that I understand my role here today is to mete out justice, and I will do so. I will be imposing a sentence that I believe is fair and appropriate, but in no way will this sentence compensate the victims for the harm that was caused to them. I want to thank officers, and I apologize if I get officer versus trooper. The name changed in the middle, so I want to thank James Casey, Ronaldo Cruz, and Mike Alfonso for their service to our community. I understand that the actions in this case prematurely ended 3 very successful careers, and there is nothing that I can do to compensate you for the end of those careers. The important thing to also remember is there's nothing that I can do to compensate you for the terror that you were feeling at the time that these actions were occurring. There's nothing that I can do to compensate the families involved who were wondering what was going on with their loved ones. There's nothing I can do to compensate the children who were wondering whether or not James Casey was going to survive. There's nothing I can do to compensate the wife of James Casey for the horror that she had to experience in thinking, is my husband going to survive? And what are my children going to do without a father if he doesn't? There's nothing I can do, and frankly, there's nothing anyone can do to compensate you for those experiences, other than for me to say, thank you for your service. Thank you for what you have done. And we are deeply indebted to you for the risks that you and other people like you take every day in protecting our community. So thank you for that. I would also acknowledge that there's nothing I can do for the family of Mr. Bueno to take away your pain. I know that it must be horrifying to sit there and think that your loved one is going to prison for the rest of his life. There's nothing I can do to change that for you other than to say, I am sorry for the experience that you are having. And I am sorry for the pain that your loved one is causing you in this moment. I wish there is something I could do to take away your pain, but I must hold him accountable. And in holding him accountable, I don't want to overlook the pain and suffering that you are also going through. Having said that, I have considered the aggravating factors that were previously placed on the record by the jury, and I've considered the information that Mr. Lorenz did provide to the court in advance of today's sentencing. Mr. Bueno, you haven't had an easy life. You've made some choices that have resulted in you being here today. I can't even fathom what resulted in those choices. I don't know who you were before you got here before me. We've been in trial together for 3 years, not trial. We've been the judge and defendant for 3 years, and you have been nothing but respectful to me. But my concern is, so what that says to me is that you have the capacity and that you have made choices that have resulted in grave harm to many, many people. But what I'm sentencing you for today is the harm that you caused to the people in this case, keeping in mind the history that brought us here. This is not an action that occurred in a vacuum. This is an action that occurred after a lifetime of other crimes. And those crimes suggest to me that you are a danger to society in addition to these crimes. So I am going to do what I feel is fair. I do find that the aggravating circumstances with respects to counts 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9 outweigh any mitigating circumstances, those including Mr. Bueno's upbringing, family circumstances, and the life circumstances that resulted in him being here today. Based on weighing the aggravators and mitigators, an aggravated sentence is appropriate, and I will place on the record the number of years for counts 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9. I will be imposing the presumptive sentence on counts 11 and 12. Starting with count 2, the court does believe that it is appropriate to give the maximum sentence allowed for the harm that was caused to James Casey. And in addition, I must add the 5 years for the gang enhancement. Therefore, the 35 plus 5 years results for count 2 in a greater than aggravated term of 40 years to begin on today's date with pre-sentence credit for 1,932 days time served.
Once terrified of the dark, now consumed by it, the man weeps in the courtroom, a sight no one expected. Alan Wade's story of haunting shadows will leave a lasting impression on you.
For 2 weeks now, I have told you not to talk about this with anybody. I will now tell you, you have the absolute right to discuss your participation in this trial with anybody that you want to.
July 8th, 2005 marked a harrowing night for a Florida couple, revealing the unimaginable horror of being buried alive. Let's see Alan Wade's reaction when confronted with his crime. Despite a mother's best efforts, her child's behavior can sometimes become unrecognizable and challenging to manage.
We did. We only stayed there a year, and at that time I was making enough money to finally able to purchase a home. I purchased a home in McClinney, and I was able to get a decent car, finally.
And was that on Long Drive?
I was on Long Drive, yes. That was a cul-de-sac. And yeah, it was a good neighborhood.
And was that move when Alan was roughly 11 years old?
Yes.
And where was Alan's room in that home?
He always had a room in the front of the house where the streetlights were because he was afraid of the dark.
And was Alan able to make friends in the area?
Yeah, he always seemed to be able to make friends real easy. I mean, Alan was, he was just, you know, he was a good little kid. Just as sweet as he could be. He was very helpful. I always called him my retirement plan because he was intelligent and he seemed ambitious and very talented with his basketball and skating and skateboarding and whatever he did, he was good at it. And I thought, well, here's my retirement plan.
More than I can express, just having someone, he was there for me more than my own father was, even just through letters and summer visits.
Do you love Alan?
Very much.
Will you continue to love Alan if he spends the rest of his life in prison?
Very much.
Thank you, Your Honor. I tender this witness for Croft.
Well, members of the jury, why don't you step back to the jury? All right, the jury is back. It is for a few minutes, for record purposes. We just have another in compensation.
What?
Be seated. Yes, yes.
Some crimes are unforgivable, and their impact is so devastating that no apology can ever heal the wounds they leave behind.
Tremendous regret and shame in my heart. Every day I'm tormented by my cruel and careless actions against you. I should have helped instead of hurted you. I'm forever sorry for my senseless, unprovoked, undeserved actions against you. This is the most passionate regret and the biggest mistake of my life. I'm also sorry for the pain and loss I've caused the Sumner's family and friends. I'm sorry for the dishonor and disrespect I've shown to both their families and my own. And to both of these families, my apologies are without end. I'd like to thank the judge and this court for allowing me this opportunity. I apologize to the prosecution and the state for not being more cooperative. Also to the Summers family, this apology is long overdue. I'm sorry to the jurors for any trouble and inconvenience for you being here. I'm sorry you have to be exposed to the horrific things that I've done. When I was 20 years old, I arrived at prison. I turned 21 a couple months after, and for about a year, I couldn't stand to look at the man in the mirror. I was disgusted with the sight of myself, and I'd felt this way for some years before. But I really wanted him gone. I contemplated suicide on several occasions before I finally accepted my fate. At some point around 22 or 23, I tore myself down, everything I thought I knew, and I rebuilt myself and the views in my life views, and I started to develop a morality that fit me. I decided I'd spend the rest of my time alive, learning and doing as much good as possible, whether it be encouraging a neighbor or showing love to someone I care about. Around the same time, I immersed myself in philosophy, and I came out with a more realistic, better understanding, better sense of being in humanism. Since my early 20s, my time has been largely focused on education, skill building, and expanding my social circles. Philosophy has opened my mind to different ways of thinking. Had somebody not sent me a book about Socrates when I first got to prison, I believe my experience in prison would have been far less productive. Science has kept me grounded. It's been a baseline for whenever things get too complicated. So quite often, I learned more ways to use the scientific application to make our lives better and more clear from a book by Michael Shermer called The Moral Art. When things are clear, they're less subject to manipulation and exploitation. So naturally, I'm drawn to this. Communication was always something that I struggled to grasp very well. So I put a lot of time and effort into developing my lexicon and being social regularly. Trying to learn other languages has given me a better understanding and appreciation for English, which is awesome. These social skills have been vital for repairing some of the family relationships that I destroyed and forging new bonds into ultimately the imperfect, perfect group we are today. I want to make them proud, and in their own way, I'm sure they all are. This is the compass needle that points me in the direction I want to travel in my life. I can promise that the person capable of doing these things no longer exists. I'm finally on the path to being the man that I always wanted to be. I've decided to, I've dedicated my life to being virtuous, devoted, and loving. Again, none of this is meant to justify or defend my inexcusable crimes. I wholeheartedly wish there was something I could do or say to heal all the hearts I've broken, to ease the animus, and to undo my gross violations against humanity.
Mr. Wade, you have previously been found guilty by a jury of your peers of the homicides of Carol and Reggie Sumner. Another jury of your peers having found that you should be imposed, the sentence should be imposed against you should be life imprisonment, but not death. I hereby impose that sentence. I remand you to the custody of the Department of Corrections of the state of Florida to remain in custody for the remainder of your natural life. If you believe there's anything illegal about this sentence or this trial, you have 30 days within which to appeal. I'm sorry?
I asked those sentences one consecutive.
That would not be inappropriate. I would do so. All right.
Your Honor, he has 904 days of previous credit plus his 40 state prison time and 1,817 days.
All right, he's entitled to that credit for time served. Take him down. Members of the jury, you have now concluded your obligation for the summons which brought you in here this week. I can only tell you that all of us who regularly work here in this system, appreciate the commitment that you have made to participate in this now almost 2 full weeks. We understand that none of this is simple, and we understand the importance and the impact that your decision has made today. For 2 weeks now, I have told you not to talk about this with anybody. I will now tell you, you have the absolute right to discuss your participation in this trial with anybody that you want to. You have the equally absolute right to refuse to discuss your participation in this trial with anybody that you want to, with one minor exception. I think I mentioned this earlier last week, and that would be there are limited instances in which I, as the presiding judge, might be required as a matter of law to ask you questions about the deliberation process. No one will ever question your verdict, but there might be something like that. It almost never happens, but I feel compelled to tell you that that is a chance. In any event, you are free to talk about it with anybody that you want to or not. With my thanks, please have a pleasant afternoon and evening.
big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.